Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of A Few Short Minutes, the pod. I'm your host, Stacy Short, and I just want to remind you it takes just a few short minutes a day of a different practice in order to rewire your brain and create a better life, one that is more aligned with what you want to see in your life. Today, we've got Kristen Odegaard. And let me tell you a little about her because I think this is going to be an amazing conversation. I'm super excited for it. So she's a woman's life coach and also an educator, trainer, fitness fanatic, and a single mom who is passionate about personal growth, wellness, and living intentionally. Love it already. She discovered life coaching after several life transitions in 2016. After working with a therapist, and she was still seeking more guidance and support for her emotional well-being, figuring out how to get off autopilot, yes, and feel more fulfilled, and began working with a coach. Her coaching experience was so transformational. She became a certified life coach so she could share, not scare, Stace. I'm just being efficient. I'm just mushing all the words together. Uh, so she could share, is what I'm saying, the skills and tools with more people. Her mindset coaching empowers women to create more calm, ease, and joy in their lives, absolutely, without guilt, overthinking, or requiring other people to change. That is so important. So we'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
She collaborates with high achieving women to detox from people pleasing, absolutely. Quiet the mean girl inner critical voice, feel calmer and more confident without just trying to try harder, which is, yes, all the things.
Yeah.
So, your niche and my niche is very similar because I focus on women people pleasers to help them with the negative self talk. Like, that's kind of the main
Mhm.
focus, and then boundary setting and saying no without guilt because my women are people pleasers as well. And very much was my story. Very much was my
Mhm.
story. So, welcome.
Yes, I'm
Introduce
excited to
yourself.
be here. Thank you. Yeah, so the bio says a lot of it, and I'll just expand a little bit about. I said, several life circumstances there that led me to that, and I was. My husband had left. He was having an affair. I had two kids, and the crisis for me at that point, of course, is like, what's wrong with me? And I'm a failure. And so, and really wanting to try and save my marriage. He wasn't interested in that. So we're going through the divorce process. And then my mom is diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And within 3 months, she had died. And we live in the same town. So, like, my entire support system with my family, my extended family, and then my mom just suddenly was gone. I'm grieving lots of things, trying to deal with my kids. My son was going through, and both my kids were in therapy. I was in therapy. So all of the life things that it's like, wow, I need to get back on track. And so I came to coaching from the perspective of having worked with a therapist, and I still work with my therapist now, so, all these years later. And coaching, though, was able to kind of, I like to think of it as being more future focused, that we're, here we are in the present, and where do we want to go, where it seems
Yeah.
like I was digging through a lot of the past with my therapy, which is definitely necessary. But I also just, I appreciated having the talk therapy sort of things to do, but I needed not just the action-based approaches, but where the type of coaching that I do as well is mainly with mindset. So it's not just about go do it, because that works sometimes. But where I was at in terms of really having to rethink who I was as a person, who I was as a mom, what I wanted to do with my career, I needed to change what was going on up here before I could even take steps to take those actions. And so for me, working on the mindset pieces and the emotional intelligence was just so empowering and transformational. And I'm thinking, why am I at that time at 40 years old? Why don't I know this? I'm a intelligent, educated person. I've worked in human resources. I've formerly been a teacher. Like, I work with people. Why don't I know these kinds of things? And so that just kind of became my mission and passion, was to share these things more with other people. And along the way, I figured out, like, wow, I'm pretty much a perfectionist, and that's not really helping me with a lot of things. And lots of perfectionists are also people pleasers. And um, so finding more and more women and diving into some of the I have a feminist certification as well, just from the standpoint of how we are socialized as women and how that impacts so much of what we do. And so I love working with women. I do actually have male clients as well, but women are my primary audience. And just trying to find out what's important to you, and that's really where I start. And then with myself and with my clients, then, is I use a values-based approach, because otherwise there's all the things, and where do you start? And so we really dive into what are your core values. And most people will be like, oh, it's my family or it's my health, and you can say these things, but when I look at your calendar or your bank, your debits coming out of your account, like, does that match with what you say is important? And also, if you're feeling resentful or sad or angry or any of those things, you're probably not in alignment. So we really take some time to figure out, like, what is it that's important? Not what you say was important, but, like, what is it? And what do you need? And how do we get there?
Yeah, I love that, because Uh, very yeah, my story is parallel-ish to yours too,
Mhm.
with the people pleasing and the perfectionism. I have been with my therapist for 10 years,
Yeah.
and while she's great, and she's not allowed to retire,
Yeah.
I I definitely encourage others to get coaches along with their therapists
Mhm.
because it's just a different approach.
It is. It
It's
really
just
is.
a different approach. And I want you to talk about values. I don't
Mhm.
think people really understand what you're saying when you say values. So I do,
Mhm.
of course, because I'm a coach. But like for
Yeah.
the layman out there, what do you mean when you say values? Because it isn't usually like spending time with my family. That's not a
Right.
core
Right.
value. So
Um,
explain that.
yeah. So this one of the first things I do with clients, again, is we're figuring out, like, what matters and why are you doing what you're doing. And one is to kind of discover what everybody's level of awareness is, but and to get you off of autopilot that I've talked about before. Um, but my theory is, if you identify what you value and then you live your life, you make decisions, you take actions, you can set boundaries from that place. It's your anchor, your North Star. I love metaphors, so, pick one. But then you create a life that's valuable to you, that you enjoy. And so these are things, it might be family, but maybe it's even more general than that, like connection or
Yeah.
belonging. For me, inner peace is a really big one. And so it has to it's not a value like what I do to get the inner peace, but as I'm evaluating things like what's in alignment with me, because I can really sense when I'm out of sorts. For me, it's my family, and then also my health. And so I'm looking at things, and I can make decisions that um, and I've been able to set some really hard boundaries, whether it be with work or other people, that no, that time is not going to work for me, because I have my workouts, I have this, or I'm taking care of my kids, and I don't allow things to come into that. And so it's finding out what that is. And I have a kind of a sheet that people can use. You can Google a values, discovering your values, and a bunch of things will come up. But usually it's a list of 40 or 50 things, and you just keep narrowing it down and narrowing it down. And I try and have my clients get down to like 3 to 5. And for some people, that is fairly easy. I have one client right now who has like, it's been about a month and he's still at like 30. And I'm like, well, this is part of the issue, because if everything is really important, then you're being spread too
Then
thin. And
and then nothing is
yes,
actually important.
yes. And so, yeah, it might be for people. Maybe it's faith, whether that's a particular religion or not, or their spirituality. It can be. I have one person that, like, she the organization of things, she's a minimalist, and everything just needs to be in its place. Okay, that, so that's what she spends time doing, that's what's important. And so it's not a judgment from me at all, but helping people find that. And I think especially for people pleasers, when you start identifying what's really important to you and what you need, then it's much easier to put, maybe it's boundaries, maybe it's just saying no, but also saying yes to the things that you do want in your life, because it's clear, or more clear at least. And most people are not valuing, giving up their own uh, thinking for other people. That's a skill or a coping mechanism, and so we need to unlearn that. But figuring that out.
Yeah, and I love, I have a values, module in mine
Mhm.
too, and, what I use it for is, like you said, like an anchor.
Mhm.
So then you can start asking your questions of, does this, add to or subtract from these values? And if
Right.
it subtracts from, you need
Mhm.
to consider not doing it. You need to
Yeah.
consider saying no, setting
Mhm.
boundaries, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
Because what I know to be true about myself and other people pleasers is we self abandon at the drop of a dime. At
Yes.
the drop of a dime. And guess what, friends?
Mhm.
When you self abandon, you erode your self trust, which erodes your self confidence, which erodes your self esteem, which erodes your self worth. And
Mhm.
so, all under the guise of, I need people to like me and think I'm indisposable. Otherwise,
Mhm.
I don't like me and I am not indisposable for myself.
Right.
Um, and that's just, it's a whole paradigm shift there.
It
And
is. And actually, one of the things I do, as we're trying to shift out of that, is um, I refer to being a people pleaser as also being a manipulator,
big,
and not necessarily consciously, but
oh,
when you are doing things with the intention of getting a person to respond a certain way, to think about you a certain way, to act a certain way, you are trying to manipulate somebody else's behavior. And when you think about yourself being manipulative, all of a sudden it's not such it's such a nice feeling, right?
yeah,
And but that's really what you're doing, not with necessarily a malicious intent,
right.
but you, as you said, I mean, you're self-abandoning all over the place. But also, so often you want that connection and validation and acceptance from the other person. And when you're not being your authentic self, you are automatically not getting that acceptance and validation. And so it becomes this constant cycle because people's opinions change. So you have to, constantly be checking in with the other people. And it's exhausting, but it's doing exactly the opposite of what you want, because you're not really getting authentic connection.
Yeah, when my therapist told me that for the first time, I was offended. I was
Mhm.
so offended.
It's a hard truth.
Yeah, it was very hard truth, and I was like, "I am not being manipulative," and because I took it as a malicious term, and
Mhm.
she's like, "Listen, you're not doing it to be malicious, but you are manipulating people's versions of you, and so whatever connections you have right now, they don't know the actual you."
Mhm.
On top of that, I am neurodivergent. I didn't know at the time. I was just diagnosed in the last year. So I was masking on top of,
Mhm.
the people pleasing. So yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. And then
Mhm.
I heard somebody say the other day that narcissists and people pleasers are two sides of the same coin because both are trying to manipulate in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh man. I don't want
Yeah.
That is
And it
the
can be. Yeah, when there's a whole bunch there, and um I think narcissist, by definition, can't see those things about themselves.
yeah,
A people pleaser maybe can, but right, the manipulation tactics that are there, intent might be really different, but it's a lot of the
still manipulative,
it is.
still trying to get people to view you in a different light,
Hmm.
for whatever reason. Yeah, that one was really rough too,
Yeah.
really rough too. It's like, that is the last word that I wanna be associated with.
Well, absolutely, because you're doing this to, um, trying to feel better and escaping, feelings of, or avoiding feelings of rejection, or just your self-worth, and all of those. And so it's hard to kind of take a look at it, but um, some people, like we said, either it's a coping mechanism that they just have adapted to, or it's been taught because society has some pretty rules, I guess, in place for women in terms of how you should act and how you should behave, and don't rock the boat. And, so I think that's changing a little bit more with each generation. But we're not very far removed, from just marriages and relationships being a business arrangement, and there wasn't really emphasis. Nobody cared about your emotional well-being. You were surviving, and they were getting through wars and in different pieces. So we're not very far removed, and I'm glad we've learned a lot of things, but we also have to unlearn a whole bunch, as we go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The sooner we dismantle the patriarchy, the better. That's a whole other podcast,
It
though.
is. It is.
That's a whole other podcast. Um, Talk about how pe people can use their values once they know them, how they are key to setting goals that are actually attainable, because I think people really struggle in
Mhm.
setting goals that are attainable and aren't fantastical or so
Mhm.
far off that they get demotivated, "Hey, I wanna lose 30 pounds," or
Right.
I want to make $100,000 a year when I only make 30.
Mhm.
It's just way too big. So talk about how you use values to kind of goal direct your clients.
Right. And so it's, it- again, kind of a process of figuring out what's there. But a lot of times with goals, and we're, at this time, beginning of February, kind of coming off the many failed New Year's resolutions, or people who just don't make them anymore. But a lot of times those goals are action based, and that's certainly in a business setting, or it can be things like, I want to be able to run this far, I want to drink this much water, or eat these things differently. And it's one thing, I think, in a work setting, especially if you have somebody else who's pushing you from external, that maybe it needs to get done. But if this is something that is really an internal goal, where you're the one who's in charge of your accountability and the motivation and determination to keep it going, it needs to really be anchored into something deeper, because willpower is not, uh, I mean, it's a finite resource. It wears out,
Yeah,
as well as even feeling motivated. If
sure.
you're waiting for that. So um, we one thing that I do is trying to keep goals um, more manageable. And then so we have our big goal, but also then little pieces within that. And because it's very easy to, I'm going to lose 30 pounds or whatever it is. And but maybe in your mind, you're like, it's never really worked before. I've tried this 16 other times. My family doesn't support me. And oh, when I go hang out on the weekends, I just want a little bit. So you have all this internal chatter that's sabotaging you.
Yeah.
And without changing some of that up, it makes it really, really hard to achieve that goal and to maintain that goal. So I try and look at it more from a values-based approach. And if it's not in line with your values, I mean, let's be realistic. You're going to have a hard time putting this in. And so it might be something that you really want. Maybe you want to double your income, and that's a great goal, and you might even really need that. But if my priorities and my values, I'm saying, are spending time with my kids, and that's my number one, those two are in contradiction with each other a whole bunch. And so the mindset going into that is either that for this season you're putting, the family isn't the number one priority, or we have to do some shifting to make those mesh, because if you're just driving down this road but you're feeling completely out of alignment, that's where most people just stop, or you're going to keep going, but then it feels so awful when you get there. You're like, why did I even do this? Because my home life is falling apart. So that's the piece for people. It's like, let's really talk about the why you want this, and what is this bringing to you besides the external kinds of things. Because most people, what they really want or don't want is a feeling. They want to feel secure. They want to feel happy. They want to feel, connection. It's not so much about the dollar amount, it's what that dollar amount means to them. Or, even running the race, it's more about the pride that I could do that, or knowing that my body was capable of that exertion, or whatever it is. So we're chasing and avoiding feelings. And so I tie those in lots of times with those values.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it makes so much sense. And
Mhm.
so let's talk about the inner mean girl because she
Mhm.
absolutely will derail
Yes.
anything that you're trying to do,
Mhm.
to again avoid something of the unknown.
Mhm.
So, talk about your like how do you categorize the inner mean girl? What do you teach your clients?
Yeah. So the inner mean girl is just the voice that you hear in your head that is telling you that, all of the negativity, and our brains skew negative, and um, as part of just keeping us alive. But that voice comes in louder than naturally. And so part of it is just recognizing and the awareness that, like, it's there.
That's the hardest
Um,
part.
and some people embrace it and even name, that
Yep.
whoever this is, that maybe it's a name of, you know somebody that brings back those feelings from middle school or high school, or whatever that you didn't like. But so recognizing that it's there, and then also understanding, like, why. Oh, yeah, here comes this voice, and of course she's there because I've never done this before, or of course she's here because I'm nervous right now, and this is what my brain does when I'm nervous. So part of it is just noticing that it's there, and then noticing those patterns. When does it come up? What kinds of things is it telling you? But then we also, part of accepting that is being able to challenge those thoughts. And so that's what we work on in the coaching session. Like, is this really true? And if you are convinced that this is true, what else is true? Because normally, we get tunnel vision on one thing, and maybe that's the negative thing over here, but there might be all of this other stuff that's also true, but yet we're focusing on this. So then we start making the mindset shifts to remind ourselves, this is true, and so is this. And this is true, and so is this. So that it just opens up our thinking so that this one has less power and intensity.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things can be true at once.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people get stuck there. It's just they want it to be so black and white, but
Yes.
it can be both. It can be
Well,
both.
and we weren't even in school. I think there started to be. I mean, I'm 46, so there's, um, went to school in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Critical thinking started to become a bigger deal, but we weren't ever taught to like analyze our own thinking. It was everybody else's thinking,
Yeah.
and so that was really a deficit or a skill deficit of sorts. And now we have to come through and recognize, like, just because it's in my head does not mean that it's true, or even if it's true, it doesn't mean that it's helpful. That I've been thinking this thing since I was 14 has no relevance in my life right now, but it's almost become a habit. So we need
Yeah.
to get rid of it and find it. So it's not even like replacing it with something positive, but it's just like, why are you still thinking that? Because you were raised this way by your parents and you heard it over and over and over again.
Yep.
And so what? But we were never taught to question that or even knew that you could. That was the stuff when I started coaching. It's like, oh, like I can just change that. Why didn't
Right.
anybody tell me
I
this?
So I'm 47 and I
Oh,
cannot remember a time where my parents sat down with me and said, "Hey, there's some saboteurs hanging out in your head,
mhm,
completely normal. All of us have them, and this is what you can do about them." Like, I don't even remember my
mhm,
mom being aware of them. I
yeah,
definitely heard them for
mhm,
herself.
yes,
I remember her standing in the mirror and, like, pinching parts of her body,
mhm,
because, she was a size 14 and her body had some bumps
mhm,
on it and some soft
mhm,
places. She never said anything. She wouldn't be like, "Oh, I'm so fat," or anything like that, but I would just see her pinch her body and make a face, and that was enough. That was enough
yes,
to do
yeah,
damage to me. She
mhm,
never said anything to me directly, but
mhm,
just by watching my mom do that, it's like, "Oh, okay. If you've
yeah,
got some lumps and bumps and you're soft, you are
mhm,
not, okay as a person. You
yeah.
are not
It
worthy.
well, and it's
You're"
not supposed to be that way. So then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
then I'm wrong.
Yep.
And how can I be pretty or sexy or whatever when my body is just not good enough?
Yeah, exactly, and then that bleeds into, well, if I'm not good enough here, I'm also
Mhm.
not good enough XYZ,
Yeah,
and it just bleeds into everything, and
for sure.
so, uh, you know, I can definitely see how my people pleasing pattern came to be, that program
Mhm.
came to be.
Yeah.
I just wish that there had been stuff in school, or, that my parents had sought
Yeah.
therapy for themselves.
Mhm.
My brother unalived himself almost 8 years
Mhm.
ago next month, and, they still haven't sought therapy for that. And if they're not gonna go to therapy, losing a son like that, I don't know anything else that's going to force
Mhm.
them to
Well,
go, "We gotta
right,
take a
and I
look."
think I think that's so characteristic of the baby boomer generation as a whole. The brain science is newer. They certainly, I mean, they didn't know it. They weren't brought up with it, and in lots of research. I love the generational studies and stuff, but baby boomers were more of the first really selfish generation, in the sense of moving away from kind of the extended families. They were moving away for jobs. They were the first generation where you really saw more widespread divorce for lots of reasons, good and bad. But they broke a lot of norms, and at the same time, there wasn't really a lot of self-reflection brought into that at all. And it wasn't part of the workplace. It wasn't part of their personal lives. And now that they're, 60, 70 years old, they're not going to embrace it. I mean, I have seen that so much with my dad as well, after my mom died. And um, we're our emotional intelligence is at different levels. And that's one of those things where, as much as I want to argue with reality and make it different, we are just at different levels.
Yeah, it just is, and it can be frustrating for sure.
Yes.
Um, and I think a big part of that frustration for me was having different expectations. Having
Hmm.
expectations of how I wanted them to show up
Yes.
versus how they are actually showing up, and me
Hmm.
railing against that. And
Yes.
so, yeah, it's been interesting adjusting my expectations.
Hmm.
It's not always easy at
No,
all.
no,
I
it's not.
definitely fall back into the old patterns where
Mhm.
I am looking for their approval, their,
Hmm.
expecting them to be more like me. Um, and it creates strife, a
Yeah.
lot of strife. But when I just kind of let go of that,
Hmm.
it's not so hard. It's not
Well,
so
and yeah, and I think that's a real sign of the emotional agility, and that's really what I'm trying to get people to do. Like, you know when to zig and zag, and kind of with things, and being able to adjust expectations is a huge part of that, whether it's for your partner or your kids or your parents or your work life. Because again, there's just so many layers to it with your beliefs, and on one side, um, and seeing the world through your lens, but that may or may not correctly align with reality. And being able to make adjustments, and that's hard because it feels like you're losing something by letting people get away with these things and having to adjust that. And but it's really, really powerful. And I think for even the people pleasers and the perfectionists to be able to let some of that stuff go, knowing that you can't control the other people around you. And that's the piece. It's really hard to let go, but it, like a lot of things, once you separate it, it's like, oh, what a relief. And it's so empowering because now I have the time and energy to focus on what I can control, which is me.
yeah, that's still a hard lesson.
Oh,
I
absolutely. And I work on that
work in
like all
progress.
the time. It's in progress for sure. Being human is not an easy task.
No, it is not. And when you have a perfectionistic mother,
Mhm.
on top of it, I'm like, "Oh, no wonder I ended up like this. No wonder."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and it just so then even then, your perfectionism clashes,
Yes.
because it doesn't show up the same way for everybody.
Hmm.
And so that's a hard adjustment I'm trying to actively make, especially when the other party isn't adjusting, and you're
Hmm.
the only one.
Hmm.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yes.
However,
Hmm.
uh, life without doing that adjustment would be even worse. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
choose your hard, right?
That's right. It's
Choose your hard.
life is yeah, not it's not necessarily going to be easy for any amount of time. So
No, not at all. So what is one of your favorite techniques or exercises that you have your people do to recognize that gremlin, that inner critic is present? Because
mhm,
from what I've seen in my coaching career and just even longer of just doing it amateurishly, not knowing that that's
mhm,
what I was doing, catching it is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Recognizing it is the hardest part because it's so subversive. First of all,
Mhm.
they can whisper,
Yeah.
and second of all, they sound like you. It's
Mhm.
not you. It was
Right.
given to you from
Yeah.
whomever, like, my mom gave me my body,
Mhm.
dysmorphia, um, but it's my voice now.
Yeah.
So, it was very hard for me to separate and go, "Where did this come from? Oh, that's where." And so
Mhm.
then I can go, "Okay, let it go. It's not yours, it's your mother's, let it go." But
Mhm.
how do you teach people how to catch it at first?
Yeah, and it's like everything, it's a process and it's a skill. And so there's layers to it. I say that it always starts with awareness. And just so I've got clients that maybe have just been working with me for a week or two, and what they do in between sessions is you are just noticing and maybe writing down when it and it's probably going to be more of a reflective sort of thing, maybe not as much in the moment,
Yeah, no.
but noticing like, oh, there was a time that my voice was there, and so so that's starting small, and just making some notes, being aware of it, because you can't change anything if you're not aware of what it is and how it shows up. From there, we can do different things, and definitely it's questioning that I ask in coaching sessions, but also journaling, which is not necessarily my favorite activity all the time either, but I try and make it manageable, like set a timer for 3 minutes.
Yeah, not my
And
favorite.
well, and I think part of it is because that shit comes up. So I don't know if I can say that.
No,
So
absolutely, you can say that, and it's very
that
true.
like
It's
stuff
very
comes
true.
up, and so we're avoiding a feeling again, right? Or what might be there. So make it manageable. Set a timer for just a couple of minutes, and um, just write. Maybe it's a topic that's upsetting you, maybe it's just I don't even know what to write about, here's what happened today, and you just start with that stream of consciousness. And mostly people will have something that comes out of it, like, oh, that's interesting, like I didn't even realize that was sticking in my brain. So again, we're noticing it and peeling it apart. And then normally we start small again. So it's this shows up probably in every aspect of your life, but we're going to start in one place and really focus where that is, make some improvements, teach you the tools, so then you have it and you can keep working in your other places. So a lot of times it will be things that come up with maybe a marriage or a relationship, about how I should be, how the other person should be. And pretty much anytime there's a should with something, to me as a coach, it's like ding ding ding, there's your flag.
Yeah.
That
Yep. There's your
it's
gremlin.
here, because why should it be that way? Where is that coming from? Is it even true? Have you had a conversation with the person about these expectations, right? It goes back. Or is this just your brain, you know saying
Your
that
brain
this
braining.
should be? So yeah, so it's kind of like just layering awareness on top of awareness, and that's part of the coaching. So I think there's a lot of things you can do on your own, and you can notice that, but sometimes you really just need that coach, because you can't see your own blind spots. And so that's the part of the work. And I try and teach the tools, and I do that on my podcast and things as well. But sometimes you really just need another person to be able to help you see where that is, because it does sound like your own voice a lot of the times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
One of my favorite things to do is something that you said earlier, and it's put a name to it. I
Mhm.
do it in a more playful, lighthearted way of like, okay, here's your inner critic. What's their name?
Mhm.
This version. Procrastination Patty. I love a good
Mhm.
alliteration. So,
Mhm.
all right, procrastination Patty. What time does she wake up?
Mhm.
Noon. Oh, okay. Does she have a job? Yeah. What is it? She holds stop signs. Like,
Yeah.
just really personifying. Does she
Mhm.
have friends? Yes.
Mhm.
Tell me about her friends. They always run late or
Mhm.
cancel at the last minute.
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
personifying it. What does she eat for
Mhm.
breakfast? Oh,
Yeah.
she eats nails.
Mhm.
Things of that nature. I think it's so helpful to personify,
Mhm.
um, that facet of your inner critic because
Yeah.
then you can catch it faster and you can go,
Mhm.
"Oh, there's procrastination Patty again. Was
Mhm.
wondering when you were gonna show up."
Right. Yeah, and you're
And
not beating yourself up. It's like this is a part of me, and this is when she shows up, and it doesn't mean I have to listen to her. It's just a part. Mm, mm,
Yeah, and why would you listen to somebody that gets up at noon and is a stop sign holder and
mm.
eats nails for breakfast?
Yeah.
Make it as fantastical as possible,
Mhm.
because then when she does show up, you'll be like you would say like, "Bro, you eat nails for breakfast. I don't wanna listen to you. I don't like
Mhm.
nails for breakfast. I don't mm-mm." And just make it as fantastical as possible.
For
And
sure.
with AI, have AI help you create an actual image
Mhm.
of what procrastination Patty looks like, or
Mhm.
furious Fran, or annoying Annette, like
Mhm.
whatever that inner critic is.
Mhm.
And if you are you familiar with positive intelligence?
Mhm.
Yeah. So according to Shazad Shemaine,
Mhm.
positive intelligence, which is a modality I'm certified in, there are 10 different saboteurs. 10.
Mhm.
And the first one's the judge. So the judge
Mhm.
judges you, your circumstance, or somebody else, and it
Mhm.
kicks open the door for the other 9 accomplices to come
Mhm.
through and just wreak havoc. And so, try to personify as many as you can, knowing
Mhm.
that there are around 10.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's just kind of what I have my clients do
Yeah,
is just
I like that too.
make a whole picture. Make a whole
Mhm.
picture and their habits, their hobbies, their job, all of it. All
Yeah.
of it. What do
Mhm.
they say the most?
Mhm.
Their catchphrase or their motto, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it just creates this whole other like awareness of when they're present because you're like, oh, that's her catchphrase. She's here
Mhm.
type
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
that's probably one of my favorite
Yeah,
modalities.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's fun. It's very, very fun. Talk about your podcast. You alluded to it. Like, talk
Oh,
about it.
yeah. So, I have a weekly podcast. It's called Stop Overthinking, and available on all the podcast platforms. And it's mainly me talking about different concepts of that I use within life coaching or how it may apply. I have started having some guests to broaden out with things as well, but it's yeah, different ways to expand your thinking, be able to catch some of these self-sabotaging sorts of things, or um, maybe pieces of negativity, being able to question yourself. uh, we see lots of people, they want to feel loved and connected, and so when we have all sorts of thoughts about those things, about how it's supposed to happen and what other people should be like and ourselves. So part of that is too that recognizing, hey, it's me and I'm working on myself. I'm not controlling the other people. Um, it's not always fair when we want to think of it that way, but focusing on what you can control. So the episodes are, if it's a single episode with just me, they tend to be pretty bite-sized, 15 to 20 minutes. Interviews will run a little bit longer, but I do have separate episodes. I talk about people pleasing all on one, and perfectionism on another. I have separate ones on values-based decision making, what to do when you feel frustrated, and kind of some other kinds of just feelings or emotions types of ones. So yeah, called Stop Overthinking. And it's I love to hear from my listeners and things that they are wanting to hear more about. And so I've been enjoying that. I started it last March, and so I just released, I think, my 43rd episode. So
Nice.
and it's growing, it's fun, and I would invite anybody who's listening and anything that I've talked about, if it has resonated, to find the Stop Overthinking podcast and pick out a couple episodes that sound interesting and give it a try.
And of course, I'll link it in the description below, you
Mhm.
guys, so you can. I'll put a couple of the platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts,
Mhm.
and so you guys can go grab it and watch and listen. Because I have no doubt that it is chocked full of actionable items that
Mhm.
could change your life, if not just for today. But
Yes.
that's all you have. So let's just
Mhm.
start with right now.
For sure.
Um, and
Mhm.
and what do you want your life to look like right now? How do you want to
Mhm.
feel right now?
Yeah.
And if you wanna feel shitty, you can do that. That's
Yep.
a choice. That's a
It
choice. You can do that.
and
Absolutely.
I've been there. There's days where it's like I'm hanging on to this because this is like,
Just
yep,
where I need yeah.
this
This
is
is
what's working for right now. But I do
right.
talk a lot about how your thinking and feelings are related, and being able to shift that and to be more intentional with especially your thinking. That's going to lead to different feelings. That's going to give you different actions and ultimately different results.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe Dispenza has a really great,
Mhm.
um, quote on that, and, my therapist sent it to me, and I told her I
Mhm.
would read it every day, so here it goes. This is actually the second time today.
Mhm.
Your thoughts and feelings come from your past memories. If you think and feel a certain way, you begin to create an attitude. An attitude is a cycle of short term thoughts and feelings experienced over and over again. Attitudes are shortened states of being. If you string a series of attitudes together, you create belief. Believe Beliefs are more elongated states of being and tend to become subconscious. When you
Mhm.
add beliefs together, you create a perception. Your perceptions have everything to do with the choices you make, the behaviors you exhibit, and the relationships you choose, as well as the realities you create.
Mhm. Wise
So
words.
I know he's fantastic. He's fantastic. Um, yeah. So if you guys want to shift your reality, if you want to
Mhm.
shift how you think, if you want to shift your perception and how you experience life every day, Kristen, tell them about your program and where they can find you.
Yeah. So my website is coachwithkristen.com, and that has links for my podcast and all my social feeds as well. Otherwise, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. There too. The coaching that I do is primarily one-on-one coaching. It's all virtual over Zoom. So I have clients all across the US, Canada, Turkey, Belgium. It's fun to
Nice.
connect with people in all over the place. We make time zones work. And primarily, I work with people in a 3-month program of weekly coaching for 12 weeks. And that gives us time to identify what you're working with right now, what we want to change, making some of those changes, and then having some maintenance. So occasionally I'll offer shorter term commitments for people, just depending on my schedule. But that's normally how I work with people, is 3 months at a time, one-on-one, and making those lasting changes that you can take and apply then to other parts of your life, and uh,
Yep.
keep moving forward one step at a time.
Yeah. So a couple of things there, friends. The foundation of coaching is how you do one thing is how you do all. So if you change one thing, it will change in the rest of your life. I promise it will. And then the other thing is research. Man, my enunciation today. Research shows that it takes at least 66 days to form a new habit.
Yep.
So 90 days is exactly you probably wouldn't want anything much less than 90 days in order to have that support of building that new habit and making it sustainable. So if you ever wonder why programs are 90 days, that's why,
Mhm.
because it's at least 66
Right.
days
If
for
everything goes the way it's supposed to,
at
and
least.
let's be real, it generally doesn't. So,
Right, exactly, exactly, and it could
mhm,
be up to 180.
mhm.
So, if it doesn't work, then it's okay, it's just at least 66 days. So,
Yes.
it just depends on the habit.
Mhm.
So Kristen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All of the links are below. Were you
Mhm.
gonna say something else? You
No,
guys.
just thank you. I have enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, come check out podcast or follow me. And I love to have new visitors and listeners, and appreciate whatever feedback comes from your thoughts too.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, Kristen will agree with me. It just takes a few short minutes a day
Mhm.
to rewire your brain for a better outcome, for a better life. So, whatever that habit is that you want to have changed, starting with the inner critic is probably the best place, because you could start a new habit and that inner critic's gonna derail you just sooner or later. It just is. That's
Mhm.
just its job. So, yeah, get help from a mindset coach for sure. All of her links will be below in the description. Y'all already know. Do all of the YouTubey things, like, subscribe, and follow me, please, and leave me comments below, and or for Kristen, and I'll have her come answer them. And, yeah, thank you so much for spending your day with us for these few short minutes. And I appreciate your energy and your bandwidth today, Kristen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys soon.